His list of publications is enormous and extraordinarily wide-ranging. His book on congressional conservatism and the New Deal from 1967 won the Frederick Jackson Turner Prize from the Organization of American Historians. In 1966, he published Grand Expectations, the United States, 1945 to 1974, in the Oxford History of the United States. This book is the most balanced and fair-minded work that deals with one of the most divisive periods in American history, and it was awarded the prestigious Bancroft Prize. Dr. Patterson retired from Brown University in 2002 as the Ford Foundation Professor of History Emeritus. While he was at Brown, he served for 3 years as chair of the history department and for 2 years as associate provost of the university. In all of his work, Dr. Patterson has demonstrated not only an extraordinary clarity in his prose, but a degree of impartiality rarely seen in the history writing of recent events. Dr. Patterson, welcome to St. Louis in Tune. What is your background as a historian? Give us a little of your background.
I've always been interested in history, and I majored in it in college at Williams College in Massachusetts. And there I became an honor student and wrote a thesis, which is very boring. And then I went on to the Army. After the Army, I went to a newspaper, the Hartford Courant, which bragged about the fact that the newspaper with longest continuous circulation in the world. And I basically covered a town outside of Hartford. I did that for about a year and a half, and I got tired of working nights, had no social life. So I went on to graduate school at Harvard, got a PhD, and wrote a thesis on the congressional conservatism and the New Deal, which then became a book and received a prize.
You were at Indiana University for a while, and then you went to Brown. Background of researching books has been commended that you are impartial and even-handed, which is rarely seen in history today. My questions to you today are about your book, Brown versus Board of Education, A Civil Rights Milestone and Its Troubled Legacy. And for our listeners, this is the 70th anniversary of Brown v. Board of Education. Dr. Patterson, describe a little bit about what the Brown versus Board of Education decision was about.
Brown versus Board of Education was a civil rights milestone because it tried to do away with racial discrimination in the schools for the first time.
Let's look into some of the details of the Brown case. In Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka, specific and detailed arguments challenged the constitutionality of racial segregation in public schools. Thurgood Marshall and his team did that with some key points. First, a violation of the equal protection laws. They contended that separate educational facilities for African Americans and white students inherently created unequal conditions regardless of the physical facilities themselves. Second, psychological harm and impact on students. They argued that segregation contributed to feelings of inferiority among African American students and undermined their self-esteem and sense of belonging in society. Third, inherently unequal facilities and resources. They presented evidence of disparities in funding, teacher qualifications, textbooks, school buildings, and extracurricular activities between segregated schools for African American students and those for white students. Fourth, the precedent and legal arguments. They challenged the precedent set by Plessy v. Ferguson and argued separate but equal doctrine should be overturned. In addition, they emphasized that social science research and evolving understanding of equality supported their argument that segregation could not provide truly equal educational opportunities. And fifth, the impact on citizenship and equal participation. They emphasized that denying African American children equal educational opportunities hindered their ability to contribute fully to society and to realize their potential. Many people don't know that there were 4 cases from different states which were consolidated together with the Brown case to challenge the constitutionality of segregation in public schools. Here are some of the details of those cases. Briggs versus Elliott in South Carolina. This was a challenge to the unequal educational facilities for Black and white students. The plaintiffs argued that the separate but equal doctrine established by Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896 was not being upheld in South Carolina. African American schools were significantly underfunded and provided inferior resources compared to white schools. The second case was Davis v. County School Board of Prince Edward County in Virginia. African American students in Farmville, Virginia, protested against the poor conditions and inequality in their segregated schools. They argued that segregation policies in Virginia violated their constitutional rights under the 14th Amendment. The third case is Belton v. Gebhardt in Delaware. African-American families challenged the segregation of schools in Newcastle County. Their argument was that Delaware segregation laws violated the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause because the separate schools for African-American students were unequal to those for white students in terms of facilities, resources, and educational opportunities. The fourth case, Bowling versus Sharp in Washington, D.C., was under federal jurisdiction rather than state jurisdiction. The plaintiffs argued that segregation in Washington, D.C. public schools violated the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which applies to the federal government. The consolidation of these cases, along with Brown, allowed the Supreme Court to consider multiple instances of segregation in public education across different states and contexts.
I chose the one in Kansas just to make it clear that it wasn't just the South that they were attacking. So you had Kansas, and Linda Brown and her father were the ones who were the real basic people in the case. They basically said that there should not be discrimination in the schools.
When you were researching this, was there any discussion about just making things equal and fair versus getting rid of segregation and pushing to integration?
Not too much. At various times it did happen, but not in Brown versus Board of Education, just aimed at discrimination.
They were more worried about the integration portion of it from what Thurgood Marshall was really pressing?
Yes, that's right.
And when you were researching this, what surprised you? What changed in your mind as you started this research and then as you ended it in writing the book?
Mostly I just learned a lot. I hadn't really studied very much about that. So it really basically a learning process, and learned a lot about the Supreme Court. I'd done a lot with that when Roosevelt tried to stack the court in 1937, and so I didn't know that.
In your opinion, what has changed over the course of time about the court's decision and its effect on education and Black-white relations?
It started off pretty well, but in the real time of gain was in the very liberal late 60s, when you really did have an attempt to deal with racial problems. But later on, mostly in the 90s, the situation had not greatly changed, and the interest in the whole thing had declined. And segregation continued in the schools. I have a couple of statistics here, that the percentage of Black students who attended schools, or Black percentage, is 90%, was up from 37% in 2000 to 40% and to 22. So we're getting worse, really, in terms of integration. And we have a decline in residential segregation in the last 30 years. But school segregation is worse. Yes, people, of course, really care about the schools, and they don't want to have any Blacks in the schools. And the cities, of course, you had what was called Black-white light, and a whole lot of a concentration of Blacks in continuation in the cities. You had a situation called redlining, which basically was handled by real estate people and assured that Blacks would not move into their neighborhoods. Obama tried to do something via federal grants to help the schools and to increase diversity, but he did not get it. The Trump administration killed it in 2020. Research in the schools showed a lot of inequality in 1977. So you had considerable decline after the 1960s, mainly in the 1990s and since. We're worse off now a little bit than we were a few years ago in terms of integration in the schools.
You mentioned white flight. What do you think of bright flight, where some whites would send their children to private schools, even if Blacks and whites live together in the same community? Do you consider that a part of the decline?
Very much that's right. It did happen.
So what has propelled us forward in a good way and stopped us or pushed us backwards as it relates to these decisions, and as time has moved Brown v. Board of Education forward?
We still do have the court. Brown v. Education continues to be the law. The court, of course, has generally become a little bit more conservative. A book to read, the one that I got a lot from, is Richard Kluger, Simple Justice. Have you ever read that?
I have that sitting on my bookshelf.
You will really enjoy it. It's a outstanding book. It's not very long either. It really made an impact on me and a lot of other people when it came out.
How did it impact you?
It was the story of the Brown case, short and newspaperish. It didn't do all the research I had to do, but it had the same conclusions and made it very clear to me what a bad situation was in the schools. It had a lot to do with my choosing to do this. I was very bookish. I wrote 10 books. This is one of my favorites. Today, and I realized how much research I'd done.
You've done tremendous research. Why is it one of your favorite books?
Mainly because of the subject. And I think Brown versus Board was an outstanding decision. And I learned how it would happen.
Do you think that we have improved race relations because of Brown v. Board of Education?
I'm not sure. It's certainly better than it was in the 50s, but obviously there's a long way to go.
We've come a long way.
I think there's been progress. There is, I think, a little bit more mixing in the schools, which I think is a good thing, but obviously you've got a long way to go.
As I read your book, it became apparent that when there was local leadership that was very involved in making Brown v. Board of Education come about, that leadership was critical. And when that leadership was not there, things failed. That was an important point that I thought that you made, that even in the South, good leadership was important.
True. Once the decision is made, then you can sit back and say, we've done it. But it didn't happen that way. I don't think whites and blacks will ever mix very well, but maybe in the 3001 they will. I'm not very optimistic.
Why do you say that?
I just know what people see and how they behave, and still a good deal of residential segregation. I think if you asked a black person, he would say that whites don't treat them very well.
In your book and in some subsequent talks that you made, especially like at the Kennedy Center, you talked how many people think that the decision in Brown v. Board of Education was a flame for the civil rights movement. I went back and listed several things that were going on at the time and after. You had Brown v. Board of Education, Brown 1 and Brown 2. You had Emmett Till's lynching in August of 1955. You had the Montgomery bus boycott and the Rosa Parks and bus segregation decision in 1956. You had the Little Rock 9 in 1957. You had the Greensboro 4 and Ruby Bridges in 1960, the Freedom Rides in 61, James Meredith in 1961-62, the Birmingham demonstration in 63, the March on Washington in 63, Civil Rights Act in 64, Selma March in 65, the James Meredith March Against Fear in 66. You were stating this. You didn't know whether it was the flame as much as it was a push. People didn't cover the Supreme Court like they do today. It wasn't broadcast like it would be today. Today, it would be all over the news. Back then, you described that it really wasn't. So was it just a foundational thing for the civil rights movement, or was it something which actually connected itself to the civil rights movement?
I think it was the first thing that the court had ever done like that. I think it was an extremely important decision. At least they said it, even though not all of it happened. It brought the subject of race relations front and center. You could avoid it if people did avoid it. It didn't make a huge difference, but it did happen. And I don't, we will never go back to that. I think it's one of the great decisions of the history of the court.
Because it brought race relations to the forefront.
Yeah, especially in the schools.
And people were very sensitive about segregation and integration happening for the schools, especially in the South.
Sure were. It sure were.
But even in the North, there wasn't what I would call excitement about integration. I think there was more verbal and mental excitement rather than actually putting it into practice. For instance, what happened in Boston with the busing and what happened in Kansas City and frankly St. Louis and all major metropolitan urban centers. Why do you think that the North was a little bit hesitant in actually carrying out something that they advocated for so long?
I just think that when I thought of the children that did not want them in bad schools, and they tended to think that automatically a school with a lot of blacks in it was going to be a bad school. Also, of course, they were going out of their way to live in terms of residential segregation. They really wanted no part of blacks if they could help it.
I'm thinking now about the dolls and that research that was provided to the courts that greatly influenced the court's decision. Dr. Kenneth Clark's experiments with dolls showed that black children in segregated schools often felt inferior to their white peers, perpetuating feelings of inferiority and damaging their self-esteem. With the help of social scientists like Dr. Kenneth Clark, Thurgood Marshall presented studies that demonstrated the detrimental effects of segregation on young minds, denying African American children equal educational opportunities and perpetuating a system of second-class citizenship. Dr. Kenneth Clark and his wife Mamie sat with a group of African American children, each with a set of dolls arranged before them. It was an experiment that would change the course of history, revealing profound insights into the psychological effects of segregation and discrimination on young minds. The dolls themselves were identical except for their skin color, one with brown skin and black hair representing African American features, and the other with fair skin and blonde hair representing white features. Clark and his wife asked the children a series of questions, including which doll they preferred to play with, which doll was nice, which doll looked bad, and which doll looked like them. The responses were very unsettling. Overwhelmingly, the children, even those with brown skin, like the dolls, expressed a preference for the white doll. They described the brown doll as bad or ugly and often attributed positive qualities to the white doll. This pattern held true across age groups and regions, painting a troubling picture of internalized racial bias and self-devaluation among African American children. Despite Clark's doll experiments, they've not been without criticism. Some scholars question the methodology, suggesting that the children's responses may have been influenced by societal attitudes or the experimental setting itself. Ethical concerns have been raised about the potential psychological harm caused by asking children to express preferences based on race. Kenneth and Mamie Clark, they conducted those experiments, the doll test, to study the psychological effects of segregation on black children and which dolls were nice and bad. Was that research valid and reliable in the long run?
Preference for white dolls? I really don't know.
I'm going to read you a quote from Jack Greenberg, which ends your book. It says this: altogether, school desegregation has been a story of conspicuous achievements, flawed by marked failures, the causes of which lie beyond the capacity of lawyers to correct. Lawyers can do right, they can do good, but they have their limits. The rest of the job is up to society. What is society's role to make it right?
Do the best you can to treat people well. Do what you can to promote equality. But as I say, I'm not particularly confident. Wouldn't say I'm a pessimist, but I'm not positive about it.
You mentioned that the Brown v. Board of Education book was one of your favorites. When you look back on your career, what can you say to people that you are most proud of?
Two books, probably. The first one, which was called Congressional Conservatism and the New Deal, was an eye-opener for me. It was based on my thesis. My first wife, she died later when we made down to the South and found private papers of very important decision makers in Congress. And that's the sort of thing that you're taught in graduate school you must do if you expect to be promoted. Anyway, I enjoyed it. It took me to Virginia and North Carolina, as I told you, all the way to New Mexico. And it introduced me to a lot of people. And it made my name, and I still pick it up and look at it. The other one, I also wrote a book on cancer, believe it or not, because my first wife died, but I won't go into that. Oh, I became very interested in Daniel Moynihan. Actually, did you see the 3D thing on him?
I have not.
I was actually in it. You can see it. I got to know him fairly well, and his wife, too. He was quite a guy when he wasn't drinking. So I did this book on the Moynihan Report. I can't remember the name of it.
So freedom.
Anyway, the Moynihan Report was very interesting to me.
Freedom is not enough. The Moynihan Report and America's struggle over black family life from LBJ to Obama. So what was interesting about it from your perspective?
First of all, Moynihan. Second of all, family life. She was a Catholic and believed strongly in the family. Of course, he drank a lot, but I really enjoyed it. Moynihan had his papers in Washington, and the gold mine is probably the biggest private collection of papers anywhere. So I really enjoyed that, and I really believe that family is where so much gets started, and that's what he was all about. So I enjoyed that. You might enjoy it yourself. Not a very big book.
I will look that one up.
It's got a fair amount of controversy.
In what way?
But he seemed to think that family life was something that the government should deal with. And we don't go that way. Anyway, that's what I like very much. It's not very big.
I want to read you another quote. It's a quote of yours about history and historians. The quote is this, Dr. Patterson: "The historian helps people understand the pastness of the past. We do this with thorough research from original sources. I don't believe that history can be instrumental as a guideline as to how you should act, but it will help you understand the immense variety and oddity of human nature."
I like that.
You wrote that.
That's why I like it. I would agree with that. Would you?
I would agree with that. There's the quote that if you don't know history, you're doomed to repeat it. But the fact that you brought in the issue of the variety and oddity of human nature really speaks to history can repeat itself if people don't want to change or have no desire to change or just want to go off in a different direction.
Oh, true.
I greatly appreciate your time today, Dr. Patterson. Thank you for speaking with us.
Thanks very much for including me.
Had a great time talking with him, Mark, and he's 89 years old.
Wow.
And we had a difficult connection, and he has some medical issues that he's been dealing with over the course of several years. And as you could kind of pick up some of the recollection of what he had done over the course of his career, were not as sharp as they would have been. Obviously,
Yeah.
I'm not as sharp as I used to be.
No.
But I had a great time talking with him. He's extremely knowledgeable, and I would highly recommend his books, any of his books, but especially this Brown v. Board of Education book. It's I don't want to say a simple read. It's a read that I kind of like. He has a lot of notes in the back where his footnotes are located, and he's done extreme thorough research. He's a avid researcher and an avid historian, and really was excited and thankful for the opportunity to speak with him.
Yeah, what a great, it's great that you got an opportunity to talk to him.
He responded to my email, and I
away.
was really.
You didn't think you would?
Well, you never know when
you don't.
when you do that. And
You don't.
I had also sent another email to the other author who he had mentioned and never heard anything back. And
That's too bad.
that happens sometimes.
Yeah, that's too bad.
But when you have the opportunity to talk to someone of his credentials and his value to the history of our country, it's important to talk to
I'm glad you were able to capture it and capture the moment, especially as he gets older and older. I mean, we hate to lose gems like that, but the fact that you were able to document this conversation, I think, is fantastic. It was very fascinating. I mean, I'm sure you could have gone on a lot longer had he maybe been younger. I don't know, but it was really good.
Yes, and that obviously that was condensed down because there were many gaps in between, and I added some things in there for the listeners to understand what Brown v. Board of Education was all about. And Dr. Kenneth and Mamie Clark, those are things that maybe people are not familiar with. So I added those in there to help people understand the course of the conversation.
And what did he say? He said we'll probably all get along in 2031.
30.
What was it?
3001 or something like that.
That's right.
Yeah, we got another century or 1,000 years to go.
Okay, I thought we were a little further along than that, but
one would think. One would think.
One would hope. Yeah.
Well, we're gonna take a break, and we'll be back to talk about some other things. This is Arnold Stricker with Mark Langston of St. Louis in Tune. Don't go away.
At St. Louis in Tune, we strive to bring you informative, useful, and reflective stories, as well as interviews about current and historic issues and events that involve people, places, and things. We cover a wide range of topics, such as the arts, crime, education, employment, faith, finance, food, health, history, housing, humor, justice, and sports, and that's just to name a few. While St. Louis in Tune originates from the Gateway City and covers local topics, we also connect to what's going on nationally as well. If you missed any of our previously aired programs of St. Louis in Tune, simply visit stlintune.com. That's stlintune.com. There you'll find the show notes and everything that was mentioned in that episode and all the other great episodes as well. And if you've got an area that you'd like us to examine deeper, well, just let us know by dropping us a note at stlintune@gmail.com. That's stlintune@gmail.com. St. Louis in Tune. It's heard Monday through Friday on the USRadioNetwork.com and many great radio stations around the U.S. and, of course, right here in St. Louis. Our website again is stlintune.com. Visit us today. That's stlintune.com.
This is Arnold Stricker of St. Louis in Tune on behalf of the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation. In 1857, the Dred Scott decision was a major legal event and catalyst that contributed to the Civil War. The decision declared that Dred Scott could not be free because he was not a citizen. The 14th Amendment, also called the Dred Scott Amendment, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized here in our country and was intended to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court decision on July 9, 1868. The Dred Scott Heritage Foundation is requesting a commemorative stamp to be issued from the U.S. Postal Service to recognize and remember the heritage of this amendment by issuing a stamp with the likeness of the man Dred Scott. But we need your support and the support of thousands of people who would like to see this happen. To achieve this goal, we ask you to download, sign, and share the one-page petition with others. To find the petition, please go to dredscottlives.org and click on the Dred Scott Petition Drive on the right side of the page. On behalf of the Dred Scott Heritage Foundation, this has been Arnold Stricker of St. Louis in Tune.
The United States has a strong tradition of welcoming newcomers and refugees. The Welcome Corps is a new service opportunity for Americans inspired to welcome those seeking freedom and safety and in turn help strengthen their own communities. Welcome Corps is a public-private partnership that is inspired by what Americans represent to so many around the world, a beacon of hope and refuge. All it takes is a helping hand. Are you ready to learn more? Contact the International Institute of St. Louis at info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. That's info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090.
You're digging it.
I do. I dig it.
Welcome back, folks, to St. Louis in Tune with Arnold Stricker and Mark Langston.
Digga.
I enjoy talking to people like James. I always called him Dr. Patterson out of respect, but
yeah,
he would put Jim in his emails back and forth. Jim,
good old Jim. What a fascinating fellow, though.
Yes, he is.
And Wow. What a contributor to our
His
society.
books, yes. And
now you were saying that the one of the reports was 6-7 inches thick.
it's pretty thick. And he said it was a quick read. It's like that's why I was laughing.
It's like
Simple Justice is the book, and it's very thick.
Good 6 inches thick.
It's probably 600-700 pages.
Wow. I can't imagine. And people will read that.
It's very thoroughly researched also.
Sounds like it could be a college course.
Yeah, it could be. It could be.
Probably should be.
And the fact that he said he thought that was the most important case that the court had ever decided, I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, it was. I mean, just I'm just trying to remember some of, they were talking about the red line. He was talking about redlining and how, the inner city became more of a black school district, which it still is today to a big degree.
I think a lot of it at the time too, for cities, especially like St. Louis, was right after the war. Of course, the Korean War was going on, but the GI Bill, people have come back. The suburbs were opening up. Suburbia was becoming popular, and people who had that opportunity to do that, they took advantage of that. And
yeah,
that's what
I still think that you and we went to University City High School, and I think the ratio, I hate to use these words, these terms, but it was like 50-50. And I think it was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had.
It was a great experience. And a lot of our classmates a lot of our black classmates, their parents were influential. They were college professors. Right. They were other kind of professionals, lawyers and doctors. Right. And it was a great experience.
It was. I didn't give color much of much time. It was like, these are my friends. These are people I go to school with. I thought this is how it's supposed to be. And then we got out in the real world and found out that it's all messed up.
I remember when I went to college, I was walking across campus and I looked around and I said, where are all the black people?
Yeah.
Because when we were in high school, like you said, it was very mixed.
Yeah. It was tremendous.
And even Asians.
Yeah.
Because of the proximity to Washington University.
Right.
A lot of the professors, a lot of the people who went there.
Right.
The kids go to U City.
I'm real thankful for it.
I am too.
And my parents, they were never prejudiced. I would say they were always like, be kind, be fair, the golden rule,
Right.
Do unto others as they have them do to you. And it was, I don't know, it was a good experience that I just wish everyone could see that. It's hard sometimes, Arnold, we've talked about it before. It's just hard for me to get it. I don't get the division, but I see where it comes from and I see it, but to me, it's sad. I can't.
I can't speak for black folks. I can speak for white folks. I don't get it why some white people are as prejudiced as they are.
I know. I don't understand it at all.
That's
either.
What I would, and I think what your point is.
Right.
I don't get where that comes from.
Yeah. And to my black friends, my African-American friends, help the white folks understand a little bit about what is going on. And I'll give you one example. When I was mayor, we had a run-in with, unfortunately, a black youth, and it was pretty bad. It was on the news and everything, and the NAACP came in, and they intervened a lot. And when they came in and they sat down in the mayor's office and we talked, I started going, I don't consider myself a prejudiced person, but after they told me about some of the challenges that black people have, particularly in the judicial system, where they're not given a second chance, they're not well represented. A youth can get a felony charge almost too easily if you're a person of color. They'll change your whole life. You can't get jobs, you can't vote. There's things that once you get that, and that was impressed upon me too. It's like, well, we're just too quick to pull the trigger on some of the struggles that folks are having, white, black, or whatever, and not help them, not say, well, okay, maybe you got to take responsibility for what you do, but so does society a little bit for putting you in that position, I think. So,
and I think, not moving too quickly, but, being fair. Would we do this with everybody like this? Then if the answer is no,
right,
then you need to step back and
right,
go another course.
Yeah. And that's very true. So, I mean, I don't get very serious here, but
no,
it's really true.
It's true.
And I didn't understand, and I still don't, because I just don't. I don't know if I ever will, as much as I try. But I'm always learning about what's happening.
Well, and I think people, and I'm going to preface what I have to say here with reading a recent article about what happened in the Kirkwood School District with a parent and a social studies teacher at a middle school there during a curriculum night, where the teacher had a Palestinian flag, or the flag of Palestine, which really isn't a country. It was that's just a fact, folks.
Right.
Had that up, and the parent questioned that. And the parent is a child of a Holocaust survivor. And the teacher allegedly said, and I use the word allegedly because you can read the accounts, said, well, that's your perspective of history, and wasn't going to take the flag down. Well, I've been an educator for a long time. And if you teach religion, if you teach any religion, you must teach all religions. You can't teach one. And so if you're going to have one, quote unquote, cultural flag up, you need to have the other flag up, because the parent said, well, are you going to put the Israeli flag up there? And he said, no. So, and then there was some dialogue between the teacher and the parent. And, you can read that in local media, folks. But it goes, so that's the preface for what I'm going to say. Where people are, and what they do, it's important to really get your facts straight. Get your history straight. Many people with this Palestinian Jewish thing and the October, thing with Hamas and everything like that. It's read history, get history well known, go back as far as it goes, figure it out, and then make some decisions on your own. Don't
jump to conclusions.
Yeah, and I'm not saying, what Israel's doing, attacking Gaza, is a great thing. I'm not saying that, but it's a shame that Hamas has to use people, children, women, hospitals, schools, those places designated to help people for their locations of their headquarters.
And the hostages.
Yes. So, and that's even in our country, when you look back at why are some of these things still going on in the South? It's like, good night. In 2024, grow up, get used to things, get on with the world. Treating people like that, I wouldn't want to be treated that way, so don't treat people that way.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, I don't know how to follow that up, but you're absolutely right. Treat folks as you want to be treated.
That's correct. You said that, Mark.
It's so simple, but
in practice,
yes. Right.
You have some days of the day, Mark? Other than today is LBJ's birthday?
It is LBJ's birthday. It's crab soup day. I like crab. I mean, I
wonder if he did.
Here's a good one. National Just Because Day. Why? Well, just because. That's why today is National Petroleum Day. Thinking about the impact that petroleum has had on us, good or bad. I would say maybe a little bit of both, huh?
Yes, my brain has microplastics in it.
National Bow Tie Day is coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You ever wear a bow tie?
When I was a child.
Can you tie a bow tie?
I cannot.
No, I can't either. I don't even want to try.
I can tie a straight tie.
Power Rangers Day, if you're a Power Rangers fan.
Never was.
No, neither was I. National Cherry Turnover Day.
Ooh.
Yeah, doesn't that sound good?
That sounds pretty good.
Here's a sad one. I don't know. It's a Rainbow Bridge Remembrance Day, remembering all those pets that have gone over the rainbow and have moved on
somewhere.
Yep,
over the rainbow
in the big dog park in the sky. Let's see. I don't think there's more herbs, less salt day. This
Herbs
is
are great.
Congress working. And National Sports Day. National Chop Suey Day.
Ooh.
Oh, okay.
I haven't seen chop suey places for a while.
I haven't had it at all. That's about all I've got.
Well, forget world peace.
Uh-huh.
Visualize using your turn signal.
Ooh.
I hate people that can't let go of the past. Debt collectors are the worst.
Oh, yes, they are.
Mm.
Ay.
Well, if someone from the 1950s suddenly appeared today, what would be the most difficult thing to explain to them about life today? I possess a device in my pocket that's capable of accessing the entirety of information known to man. I use it to look at pictures of cats and get into arguments with strangers. Two reasons I don't trust people.
Uh-huh.
I don't know them, and I know them.
Yep.
Good judgment comes from experience. And experience, well, that comes from poor judgment.
Yes, it does.
Let's see here. I finally realized it. People are prisoners of their phones. That's why they are called cell phones.
Oh, I like that. That's not bad.
Let's see. I've said that one before. I need to go to some recent ones that I have right here.
No, sorry.
Yes.
No,
sorry.
No, we don't want that.
I hate to cancel. I know we made plans to get together tonight, but that was 2 hours ago. I was younger then, full of hope, but now I'm tired. Let's see here.
Fall asleep sitting up on the couch.
Yes. Do you do that?
Yeah.
In Irish, when you talk about emotion, you don't say I am sad. You'd say sadness is on me. This is very interesting. And I love that because there's an implication of not identifying yourself with the emotion fully. I am not sad. It's just that sadness is on me for a while. Something else will be on me another time. And that's a good thing to recognize.
Okay. All right.
Once I became a parent, I finally understood the scene where Yoda gets so tired of answering Luke's question, he just dies. Always remember this, folks. Rumors are carried by haters, spread by fools, and accepted by idiots.
Correct. That is correct.
Okay. Remember when we used to laugh at the commercial, I've fallen and I can't get up? Yeah, it's not so funny anymore, is it?
No. No, it's not.
We squint at the sun because it is bright. We squint at people because they are not.
Do it again, okay.
Let's see what else. One more here.
One more? Uh-oh.
I gotta do one more good one here.
Good luck with that.
Okay. Well, so this is a good one, folks. It's not a funny, but it's a kind of just a thought provoker.
Okay.
If you don't heal what hurt you, you'll bleed on people who didn't cut you.
Ooh, that was good.
But I will end with some humor. I'm sorry. Husband, when I get mad at you, you never fight back. How do you control your anger? The wife says, I clean the toilet. Well, how does that help? I use your toothbrush.
Oh, yes. That's not right at all.
Well, folks, that's all for this hour. We thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can listen to additional shows at stlintune.com. That's stlintune.com. Consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, or your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more listeners and continue to grow. I want to thank Bob Berthasell for our theme music and co-host Mark Langston, and we thank you for being a part of our community of curious minds. St. Louis in Tune is a production of Motif Media Group and the U.S. Radio Network. Remember to keep seeking, keep learning, walk worthy, and let your light shine. For St. Louis in Tune, I'm Arnold Stricker.